My name is Marco D'Angelo. I'm 38 years old, and until last month, I was the executive chef at Solus Bistro, a restaurant I helped build from a fading local joint into one of Asheville, North Carolina's most beloved culinary landmarks. I never planned on becoming a chef. I came here to study architecture at UNC Asheville. Nights, I washed dishes to pay tuition. Then one evening, the line cook didn't show. I stepped in. That night, something clicked. The rhythm, the heat, the language of timing and touch. Within 6 months, I dropped out of school and dove headfirst into the kitchen. That was 12 years ago. I spent the next 6 bouncing around kitchens, some big, some forgettable. But every shift taught me something. Then I found solace. Back then, it was a struggling bistro with cracked tiles and a menu lost in time. The owner, Harold, was close to shuttering the place. But he gave me a chance. "Cook the food that matters to you," he said. "I'm out of ideas." So I did. I cooked the food I grew up watching my grandfather make in our small apartment in Queens. He was Neapolitan, one of those old-school men who never measured, just felt. His food wasn't fancy. It was honest: braised lamb with rosemary and juniper, seafood stew with saffron and white wine, olive oil cake soaked in blood orange liqueur. Recipes passed down like prayers, and people noticed. Locals started coming in. Then critics, tourists. Solace became a name people whispered when talking about the kind of place that reminded them of home. Not flashy, just real. But then Harold's wife got sick. He sold the place to a restaurant group. They mostly left me alone. "Don't fix what's not broken," the CEO told me. And for 3 years I didn't. Then came Brielle Carrington, new CEO of Novalink Hospitality. She walked into my kitchen one Tuesday afternoon like she owned more than just the restaurant. She did, technically, but it didn't feel earned. She barely made eye contact as she opened her laptop and said, "Marco, we need to talk about your menu." I just stood there, towel over my shoulder, still smelling like seared trout. "Your food's too traditional," she continued. "It's good, but it's not trending. We want something that'll pop on Instagram. More fusion, more deconstruction, more energy." I didn't argue. I just nodded once and asked, "When's my last day?" She blinked. "I'm sorry." "You're replacing me, right?" I asked, calm, not bitter. She hesitated. "No, well, we're restructuring. I'd like you to help transition the team." 2 weeks. 10 days later, I was out. Just like that. 6 years of sweat scars and 70-hour weeks. Gone. That night, I sat alone at the corner of the bar with a glass of Brunello. Lights off, except for the one over me. I ran my hand across the weathered wood of the bar top wood I'd personally refinished the year we won our first regional award. It didn't feel real. The kitchen didn't know yet. Andre, my sous chef, had been with me 5 years. Rena, our pastry magician, just over 3. Leo, who worked the grill with metronome precision, had come from a failed steakhouse across town. We'd become a family. The next morning, Andre caught me rolling up my personal knives. He froze. "Chef." I told him about the meeting. His face went red. "But we're booked out for weeks. You built this place." "What the hell is she thinking?" "She's thinking like someone who never worked the line," I said. "It's her place now." He stared at me like I'd betrayed him. "But the food, those recipes, they're yours." "Not anymore," I said. I spent the next few days packing up in silence. I cooked service as usual. I didn't want a farewell party, didn't want speeches. I just wanted to finish what I started. On my final night, I cooked every signature dish one last time. The lamb, the stew, the olive oil cake. I tasted them all. Not because I needed to remember. Those flavors were part of me. But because I needed closure. I needed to know they ended with dignity. I left a typed list of recipes on Brielle's desk. The versions we kept for health inspections. For the line cooks. But not the real ones. Not the way I actually made them. Those lived in my hands, in muscle memory and instinct. She didn't ask for more. Not then. 3 days after I left, Andre showed up at my apartment, still in his whites. Still looking like he'd just stepped out of battle. "It's a mess," he said, pushing inside. "Kevin, the new guy, can't cook your dishes. He's trying, but they're coming out wrong." "They have the recipes," I said, pouring him water. He gave me a look. "Yeah, the paper recipes. Not what you did, not the instincts." You think Kevin knows the lamb needs more salt in winter? That the stew needs more acid when using Gulf shrimp? I didn't answer. The regulars are noticing. Mrs. Carmichael sent back the lamb twice last night. Said it didn't taste like Italy anymore. That hit harder than I expected. She'd ordered that lamb every Thursday for 5 years. Told me it reminded her of her late husband, of Naples, of love. They're planning a relaunch, Andre added. New concept. Influencers. Critics. I looked out the window, watched the leaves moving like ghosts in the wind. You looking for work? I asked. He blinked. What? My grandfather's old place, downtown. Been empty since he passed. I still own it. You thinking of starting something? I hadn't been. But saying it out loud changed something in me. Maybe it was time to stop building someone else's legacy. Maybe it was time to rebuild my own. The morning after Andre's visit, I walked through downtown Asheville in the cool light of early fall. Coffee in hand, I stopped in front of my grandfather's old trattoria. The place hadn't opened in over a decade. Paint peeling, windows dusty. But it had bones. Real ones. Back when I was a kid, we used to visit every summer. He'd open the doors at sunrise music playing from a crackling radio flower already in the air. I was barely tall enough to see the counter, but I remember how he moved like cooking was a language and he was fluent in every dialect. Standing outside now, I pressed my hand against the glass and whispered, You still in there, nonno? That same night, Andre called again. Leo's quitting, he said. Rena too. They want to come with you if you're really doing this. I think I am, I replied. And I meant it. It wasn't about revenge. Not yet. It was about something older. Something simpler. The food had always come from somewhere real, and I'd forgotten what that felt like. Meanwhile, Solace Bistro was starting to fracture. On food blogs, new photos appeared, ones I didn't recognize. A deconstructed lamb chop sitting like sculpture on a slate plate. Seafoam green gels instead of saffron broth. The olive oil cake reduced to a cube surrounded by powdered citrus and air. The comments told the rest of the story. What happened to the soul? This isn't the Solace we fell in love with. Please bring back the real menu. Then Brielle called me. First time I'd heard from her since she replaced me. Marco, she said, voice too smooth. How are you? Busy, I said, getting my hands dirty again. We're experiencing some transition challenges, she continued. I was hoping you might be open to consulting, just to get things back on track. I paused. You have the recipes. There are nuances missing. I almost laughed. Nuances. Like how the lamb needed a longer rest time on colder nights. Or how the seafood stew required more heat if the tomatoes weren't in season. Or how the olive oil cake collapsed if baked on a humid day without adjusting the flour. I can offer triple your salary. Just 2 weeks. Full credit as consulting chef. It's not about money, Brielle. Then what's it about? She snapped. Pride. No, I said quietly. It's about knowing what you built wasn't just a menu. It was memory. You treated it like a trend. I hung up. Felt nothing. Just peace. 2 days later, I was at the farmer's market when Harold, the original owner of Solace, found me picking tomatoes. Heard what happened, he said, handing me a better one. Also heard you're opening your own place. Thinking about it, I replied. She called me, you know. Asked if I had any of your early notes. Sounded desperate. I raised a brow. What did you tell her? That your food was magic to me. I never knew how you did it. We stood there for a beat, both looking at tomatoes like they held answers. She's in trouble, he finally added. Those investors bought into your reputation, not hers. If she bombs the relaunch, I didn't need him to finish the sentence. That evening, Rena sent me a photo of the 5th failed attempt at the olive oil cake. This one cracked in the center, too dry, no citrus lift. I smiled. That cake had taken me 2 years to perfect. You couldn't speed up flavor, not without losing the truth of it. By the time the day of the relaunch came, the industry buzz was thick. Critics, influencers, local press. Andre sent me updates in real time. Kevin, the new executive chef, was spiraling. Sauces breaking. Timing off. One dish came back cold. Mrs. Carmichael returned again. Said it tasted like someone trying to remember how to love. That night, the team Andre, Leo, and Rena showed up at my apartment. They brought beers and heavy silences. It was a bloodbath, Rena said softly. I listened as they told me what happened, how Brielle kept interfering mid-service, blaming the equipment, the staff, the ingredients. Anything but the truth. She doesn't understand that food is more than technique, Andre said. She thinks if she follows a formula, she'll get your results. You can't replicate soul from a spreadsheet, Leo muttered. There was more. Andre leaned in, voice low. I overheard her on the phone with one of the investors. Turns out she leveraged everything to buy Solace. She expected to flip it in a year. Thought the brand would sell itself. Based on something I built, I said the words bitter in my mouth. Rena nodded. But without you, there's nothing to sell. I looked around the room at the friends who still believed in what we'd done, who showed up when I had nothing to offer but an idea and an old building. I'm going traditional, I said finally. They stared. My grandfather's recipes. No deconstruction, no gels. Just real Italian food. Chianti bottles with candles. Red checkered cloths. His way. What about the non-compete, Andre asked. It says I can't open a similar concept within 8 kilometers. And this is a different concept. Old school trattoria, I said. Solace was modern American with Italian notes. This is family. The next morning, the first reviews hit the web. A pale imitation of its former self. Style over substance. The soul of Solace has vanished. That afternoon, I signed the lease on a small storefront across from my grandfather's building. A temporary home while we renovated the main space. I named it D'Angelo's Table. 12 seats. No hype. Just food that remembered where it came from. 3 weeks later, we opened quietly. No ads. Just a single post from Rena's Instagram, the chef is back. And he brought the flavors with him. That first night, we served 38 covers. People came in hushed, curious, cautious. But after the first bite, something changed. They relaxed, smiled, some even cried. Every dish was exactly as Nono would have made it. By the end of the week, we were fully booked. The regulars had found us. So had the ones who used to be regulars at Solace. Mrs. Carmichael came in wearing the same scarf she always wore on Thursdays. She ordered the lamb, took one bite, closed her eyes. Then she opened them, looked straight at me and whispered, "There you are." 2 days after our soft opening, the first manila envelope showed up. Taped to the front door of D'Angelo's Table. Inside a letter from Brielle's attorney. Alleged violation of my non-compete clause. Legal threats. Demands to cease operations within 14 days or face formal litigation. I brought the letter to Anthony, my cousin, and a business lawyer who'd helped with the permits for both this spot and the old trattoria we were renovating. He sipped his espresso as he read it, expression unreadable. Then he smiled. Right on schedule, he said. I was wondering when she'd play this card. Can she shut us down? She can try, he said, flipping through the pages. But she's going to have a hard time convincing any judge that what you're doing here is the same concept as Solace Bistro. I looked around the cafe wooden chairs with hand-stitched cushions, the open kitchen lit by copper lights, Chianti bottles with candles flickering on every table. This wasn't modern fine dining. It was memory. Her case depends on proving you're competing with her directly, Anthony explained. But Solace is New American Fusion now. You're running a traditional Southern Italian trattoria. Different menu, different price point, different vibe. The only thing you share is your name, and you've been very careful not to use anything branded. She'll come after me harder if Solace keeps sinking, I said. Let her, he said. If she escalates, we'll counterclaim. But honestly, I think she's too busy trying to stop the bleeding. Later that afternoon, Andre came in after finishing his shift at the construction site next door. He'd been helping manage renovations at the original trattoria, keeping costs down by doing half the work himself. She's changed the menu again, he said, dropping a paint-stained rag onto the counter. Solace. He nodded. Went full molecular. Foam, smoke, frozen powders. Zero connection to anything you ever made. That's good, I said. The more she changes, the easier it is to prove I'm not copying anything. Rena walked in just behind him, holding a paper bag of lemons and ricotta. You know what's wild, she said. People want the real thing. I had 3 customers ask me if we're bringing back the orange-laced olive oil cake. We are, I said, smiling. Tomorrow night. That evening, as I was prepping the lamb, I saw something taped to the kitchen door. A small envelope. Inside was a note written in an elegant, almost shaky hand. Your mother said you might want this, Dad. And below it, a leather-bound journal. My grandfather's original recipe book. The real one. The one I hadn't known existed. I sat down on the floor right there on the tile, flipping through yellowed pages. There were notes scrawled in the margins. Adjustments. Memories. A sketch of a vineyard near Siena. Stories of where he first tasted each dish. Who taught him? When he served it last. Recipes that had never made it into our family dinners. Variations that explained mysteries I'd never been able to solve. It felt like finding a conversation across generations. That night I cooked differently. Not just from memory, but from legacy. The following week, a journalist from the Asheville Gazette showed up during lunch. I recognized her instantly, same reporter who'd written a glowing piece on Solace 2 years ago, and a scathing takedown of its relaunch just a month ago. She sat alone, ordered the seafood stew and the olive oil cake. Didn't say a word the whole time, but I saw the way her expression shifted, how her spoon lingered over the broth, how her hand hovered after the first bite of cake. The next morning, her review was published. The heart of Solace didn't vanish. It just crossed the street and took its soul with it. D'Angelo's table doesn't chase trends. It remembers where flavor begins, deep in tradition, rooted in memory. If you want foam and confusion, go west. If you want to taste love, go here. By noon, our reservations were booked out for 6 weeks. That same afternoon, Anthony called again. Guess what he said? Brielle's dropped the lawsuit. Really? Yeah, her investors are suing her now for misrepresentation. They claim she sold them on the old Solace and then delivered some neon-lit ghost of it. I sat back in my chair. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I just felt still. She's trying to sell it now, Anthony continued. Fire sale pricing, half of what she paid. I didn't respond. Not because I didn't care, but because it wasn't my fight anymore. That night, as I was closing the cafe, I saw a black car pull up across the street. A woman stepped out, tall, crisp blazer, heels sharp enough to wound. Brielle. She walked into the cafe like a storm that had already passed. The dining room went quiet. Every regular recognized her. She didn't say a word, just stood there. I stepped out from the kitchen, wiped my hands. We locked eyes. I expected fury. I got something else. Resignation. Maybe even respect. She gave me a small nod, then turned and walked out. No dramatics, no parting shot. She never came back. A week later, Solace Bistro closed its doors for good. The building sat dark and empty, a monument to misunderstanding. And in that silence, I realized something. This had never really been about revenge. It had been about truth. About remembering that food wasn't just a product. It was a story. 1 month after we opened, the trattoria renovations were finally done. We kept the cafe for lunch. Named the new space Casa D'Angelo, my grandfather's name still carved into the front in iron script. The night of the opening, I stood at the back of the kitchen watching as people poured in. Couples, families, strangers with eyes wide from the smell alone. Then Andre nudged my shoulder. You gonna stand there all night? I smiled. Let's cook. We worked like a single breath. The kitchen danced. Rena spun sugar for the cake. Leo grilled the lamb to a precise internal temp. Andre checked every plate before it left the pass. Then, halfway through service, Rena appeared in the kitchen. There's someone here to see you. I walked into the dining room, and there in the far corner stood my father. He rose when he saw me, hand extended awkwardly. I didn't take it. I hugged him instead. I was wiping down the espresso machine one morning when my phone buzzed. A name I hadn't seen on my screen in years lit up. Dad. I didn't pick up. Instead, I stared at the screen until it went dark, then set the phone face down on the counter. He hadn't called when I dropped out of architecture school. Hadn't called when I opened Solace. Hadn't called when I was fired. But he had sent that journal. My grandfather's legacy, scrawled in uneven lines and stained with olive oil in memory. That meant something. The following week, I got a call from Anthony. She dropped the lawsuit, he said. Just like that. What changed, I asked. Reality, he said. Her investors have turned on her. They're suing her now for misrepresentation, claiming she sold them on a brand she dismantled the moment she took over. Harsh. Fair, he replied. Solace was built on your food. She promised them something she couldn't recreate. I nodded, more to myself than him. And now, she's unloading it. Half the price she paid. That afternoon, I walked past Solace Bistro. Its once polished windows were streaked with fingerprints and rain. A handwritten sign read, "Closed for restructuring. Stay tuned." But everyone in town knew what that really meant. The heart was gone, and nobody was waiting for it to beat again. Meanwhile, across the street, our renovations on Casa D'Angelo, my grandfather's original trattoria, were nearly finished. Every week after lunch service at the cafe, Andre and Leo helped move equipment, paint walls, hang light fixtures. Rena ordered custom plates that looked like the ones my grandfather used back in the 70s. Heavy, cream-colored, slightly chipped on the edges. We kept the original stove. It took a while to repair, but it worked. It roared like it remembered. On the final night before opening, I walked through the empty dining room. 12 handmade wooden tables. Brick oven in the back. A framed photo of my grandfather near the entrance. He stood in front of this very building, sleeves rolled up, flour on his apron. He looked proud, like he knew we'd come back. The night we opened Casa d'Angelo, I arrived early. The team was already in motion. Rena was brushing the cake with citrus syrup. Andre polished the pass. Leo stood at the grill humming old Sinatra under his breath. Then Rena appeared in the doorway. "There's someone here to see you." I wiped my hands, stepped out into the dining room, and there he was. My father, gray at the temples now. Suit too formal for this space, but his eyes familiar. He stood when he saw me, offered a stiff handshake. I ignored it. Pulled him into a hug. He hesitated, then held on. We sat in the corner while service buzzed around us. He ordered the lamb, the same one his father had made for him as a boy. He took a bite and didn't speak for a full minute. Then he nodded. "He'd be proud," he said. "More than if you'd become an architect." I didn't know what to say, so I said nothing. Just let the silence stretch. Before he left, he pulled a key from his coat pocket. Pressed it into my palm. "What's this?" "The vineyard in Sonoma," he said. "Your grandfather left it to me. I never knew what to do with it." I stared at the metal between my fingers. "You should have it," he added. "Maybe someday. You'll make wine as good as your food." That night, after the final guests left, I sat at the counter. Rena lit the last candle. Andre swept the floor. Leo stood in the doorway, arms folded, watching the empty chairs. I poured a glass of Brunello di Montalcino, my grandfather's favorite. Held it up to the light. Then took a sip. The room was quiet, save for the hum of the old refrigerator and the soft creak of the building settling into its new life. I looked around and finally understood. This wasn't revenge. It wasn't a comeback. It was a return. 2 weeks later, we added a new dish to the menu. Lamb a la Carmichael. Mrs. Carmichael had been one of the first to find us after Solace fell apart. She came every Thursday like clockwork for 6 years. Then she'd vanished after the relaunch. Now she was back. Same table, same scarf, same gentle tears after the first bite. "You brought it back," she whispered. "You brought him back." That night, I walked her to her car. She held my arm like I was her grandson. Maybe I was, in some way. Our reservation list stretched into the winter. We hired 2 more line cooks, a dishwasher, another server. But we never changed the menu. 5 starters, 5 mains, 3 desserts. No trends, no tricks. Only truth. Then one afternoon, as I was testing a new variation of tiramisu from the journal, Anthony came in with his laptop. "You're going to want to see this," he said. He turned the screen. There on the Novalink investor portal was an update. Asset liquidation. Solace Bistro. She'd sold it. To a real estate developer, no less. They were turning it into a co-working space with a smoothie bar. Anthony looked at me. "She's out." I nodded. But I didn't smile. There was nothing to gloat about. Only a quiet sense that a chapter had closed. Later that week during cleanup, Leo asked, "You ever think about buying it back?" I paused. Then shook my head. It was never the building, I said. It was what we did inside it. That night, I unlocked the door to the trattoria one last time. Stepped inside, turned on the kitchen lights. Everything hummed. The copper pans glowed. The cast iron stove held its heat like a secret. I walked to the back wall where a quote was painted in dark brushstroke words from my grandfather's journal. "The food remembers even when the people forget." I ran my fingers over it. Then walked to the line and picked up the knife. 6 months after we opened Casa d'Angelo, I stopped thinking about Solace altogether. Not because I'd forgotten, but because I'd finally moved past it. The cafe next door, D'Angelo's Table, was now our lunch spot. Simple sandwiches, seasonal soups, staff meals turned into bestsellers. But dinner belonged to the trattoria. Every evening, the dining room filled with voices that rose and fell like tide. People leaned over candlelight, breaking bread, sharing wine, laughing, the kind of laughter that echoed off wood and brick. That was what we'd built, not just a restaurant, a place that fed people's lives. Then one quiet Tuesday, a black town car pulled up outside the trattoria during lunch service. The room quieted. Conversations thinned. Brielle stepped out. Tailored coat, straight back, no entourage. She walked inside, and for a long moment said nothing. I stood at the pass, hand steady, heart still. She scanned the room, taking in the packed tables, the kitchen's heat, the copper pans swinging on their hooks like wind chimes. Then our eyes met, and for the first time I saw it. Not arrogance, not disdain. Resignation, maybe even understanding. She gave me a single small nod, then turned and walked out. The door closed behind her like a final page turned. No words. No need. That night we served 68 covers. The last plate went out at 9:47 p.m. And at 10:12, my father came through the kitchen door carrying a wooden crate. Found this in the vineyard storage, he said, setting it on the counter. Bottled in 92, only 2 left. He looked around the room at Andre wiping down the grill, Rena packing up pastry bags, Leo locking up the wine fridge. Your grandfather was always proud of you, he added. He just didn't know how to say it. I poured 2 glasses. We drank in silence. Weeks passed. Spring came. We added 2 outdoor tables. The line cooks we hired started mimicking the same instincts I once had, to fight for, adjusting for humidity. Shifting baking times. Asking what would Nono do. It was never about ego, only about the details. One Sunday, Mrs. Carmichael brought her granddaughter. They ordered the lamb, shared it. Afterward, the girl said it tastes like history, and I smiled. Because it did. 1 year after opening Casa d'Angelo, we hosted our first private event. A small wedding. 40 people. Handmade vows. Laughter. Barefoot dancing. At the end of the night, the bride came into the kitchen with tears in her eyes and whispered, "This food made our day feel real." She didn't mean fancy. She meant felt. That's what I'd always chased. Not applause, but presence. That same month, Anthony forwarded me a real estate listing. Solace Bistro. For sale again. Apparently, the co-working space concept had failed. Too noisy. Too expensive. Too empty. I stared at the screen for a while, then closed the tab. I didn't need it. Some buildings carry ghosts, and some ghosts should stay buried. Instead, we focused on growing what mattered. We started bottling our olive oil, began offering family-style nights on Thursdays. Every Friday morning, I read my grandfather's journal again. 1 page, 1 story, 1 note on oregano or salt or joy. His words weren't perfect, but they were real, and they were mine now. Then one afternoon in early summer, I opened the mailbox outside the trattoria and found a small envelope. No return address. Inside, a folded napkin with writing in permanent marker. "This is the food I chased but never caught. You were never the problem, I was." There was no name, but I didn't need one. I folded the napkin, put it in the drawer with my grandfather's journal. Some things don't need closure, they need distance. On our 2nd anniversary, the team gave me a gift. A custom-made carving for the front entrance. A quote etched in olive wood. "The table is sacred, but only when the food tells the truth." I traced the grain with my fingers. Thought of the early days. The silence after I was fired. The sting of not being seen. And the louder truth that came later. That building someone else's dream will never feel like building your own. That night, I sat at the back of the restaurant with a glass of wine watching people eat. A woman tucked a strand of hair behind her ear and fed her toddler a spoonful of stew. A couple toasted their anniversary over tiramisu. An old man read the menu out loud to his wife, who smiled without needing to answer. And in all of it, I saw what I'd been missing. Not victory, not redemption, not even legacy, but belonging. The thing I'd been looking for the day I stood in front of a cracked trattoria window, asking if it still remembered me. Turns out it had. It was just waiting for me to come home.